In this episode, I'd like to cover some right hand plucking techniques. I would be presenting a few of techniques which I believe I have originated. And I've not seen this in any other Vainika. And I would specifically concentrate on these new techniques which I believe are new, and I would like to share them with you. They have been inspired and motivated by my experience with other instruments, and some of them have been motivated by a need to reproduce sounds from other instruments. And I would start off with the first one, which is inspired by santur. In santur you see very high plucking frequencies, like right. If we try to pluck it with two fingers, we are never going to be able to achieve that speed, simply because if you notice, the plucking in Veena is only top down. What is the maximum speed you can get? Okay, still that doesn't match the kind of the ultra high frequency plucks that santur gets, because they let it vibrate on the strings. So how do we go about doing that? And one way that I have found to be very useful in at least coming closer to that kind of high frequency plucking is using the roughness of the skin here. The skin is rough here. You use that. It's almost like a bowing technique. I have actually even explored fitting a small bow here to come up with higher continuity, but I've not found any artisan who would really make that for me. So what I decided was I'm going to use the skin to do the plucking. It's going to sound like this. There are little varieties here. You could use a small hump here to actually do the plucking, okay, like this. Again. Again. One could even use a pluck like this, like a standard guitar pluck, and then try the two-way plucking, right? Okay. You'll have to be careful that you don't come close here. If the plucking here is like plucking in the fretted region, actually gives you more control, but you have to be careful that you don't rub against the wax too much. So So the two things here that we have introduced is the top down or double plucks like this one. Or you could use the skin, roughness of the skin, almost like a bow. And one of the things that I have also observed, it's correct me if I'm wrong, when you play with other instruments like the sitar, I've also had the great fortune to have jammed a lot with flute shashank. The instruments such as the sitar, the guitar, and flute, and so many other instruments, they have devised a way to come up with this high frequency plucks or notes, that is note density, number of notes that is being distinctly played in a unit time. The note density is very high in other instruments, whereas for the Veena, because of the top down plucking, one way plucking has limited, in a sense, the number of plucks per second, or the number of the frequency of plucking. So in order to really play without having kind of a shortcoming, because this instrument Veena is immensely capable, and the capacity is not limited because of the instrument, but it is limited, if at all, by the imagination of the players. So let us not have this simple right hand technique, or rather the lack of that type of double plucking deter us from really exploring the higher speed phrases. Sometimes you see that the high speed that you hear from say a flamenco guitar or even the sitar is not really the left hand movement, but it is very high frequency right hand technique that sets that kind of the turbo charge to those instruments. So this is, in a way, I have, in my modest attempts, tried to fill in that gap. So once again, there are two, rather this is can be broken into three different techniques. One is sheer roughness as a bow, like this. Okay. Another is the mound here, that is with the first bend of the ring finger. Okay. It's a little bit tricky because you have to keep the distance kind of constant, and yet it cannot be rigid. Okay, like this. And finally, use a standard guitar pluck to produce the double directional plucking.